Neuroscientists just discovered something shocking. The brains of people who try to control everything actually function exactly like the brains of those drowning in chronic anxiety. But there's a way to completely change this. I know you're here because something in your life feels too heavy to carry. Maybe it's work pressure, relationships not going as planned, or simply the exhaustion of trying to keep everything on track. Welcome to Where Hearts Rest. I'm someone who has learned from thousands of people that there's a way to love what we cannot change, and it will free you in ways you never imagined possible. Take a deep breath with me. In the next 60 minutes, you'll meet someone who discovered that letting go doesn't mean giving up. You'll understand why an ancient monk smiled when his student asked about controlling suffering. You'll hear 3 stories about hearts that found freedom in unconditional love. And most importantly, you'll discover that true power doesn't come from controlling life, but from allowing life to love you back. This isn't about becoming perfect or having all the answers. This is about returning to the warmth that has always lived in your heart, patiently waiting for you to remember that you are already whole, already enough, already home. The ancient masters knew something we've forgotten in our rush to fix and force and manage. Today, you'll remember it too. Your heart is about to remember how to rest. Here's something that will surprise you. The average person checks their phone 96 times a day. Not for emergencies, not for important calls, but because somewhere deep inside we believe that if we just stay on top of everything, we can prevent disaster from striking. But what if I told you that this very attempt to control is actually creating the chaos we're trying to avoid? Let me share a story that changed everything for someone I know. There was a person, and maybe you'll see yourself in this, who had turned their smartphone into modern prayer beads. Every notification was checked instantly. Every weather app was consulted before leaving the house. Every conversation was mentally rehearsed before it happened. This person lived in what I call the invisible prison. From the outside, their life looked organized, efficient, even enviable. But inside, they were exhausted from being the self-appointed manager of the universe. One morning, their phone died. No weather forecast, no traffic updates, no ability to control even the smallest details of their day. And something unexpected happened. The day flowed more beautifully than any they could remember. Pause with me here for a moment. Place your hand on your heart. Can you feel it beating? Notice that your heart doesn't ask your permission to beat. Your lungs don't wait for your approval to breathe. Life has been taking care of you long before your mind started trying to take control. This story illustrates what Buddhist psychology calls tanha, often translated as craving or attachment. But it's deeper than wanting things. Tanha is our compulsive need to arrange reality according to our fears. You see, in ancient Buddhist understanding, the mind creates suffering not through desire itself, but through our attachment to how things must be. When we grip tightly to outcomes, to other people's responses, to perfect timing, we're not actually creating safety. We're creating a prison where we become both the guard and the prisoner. Modern neuroscience confirms what Buddhist masters knew 500 years ago. When we're in constant control mode, our nervous system stays in a state of hypervigilance. The brain's default mode network, the part responsible for self-referential thinking and worry, becomes overactive. We literally rewire our brains for anxiety. But here's the beautiful truth that often gets overlooked. You can develop loving kindness for the part of you that wants to control. This isn't about shaming your controlling tendencies or forcing yourself to just let go. It's about understanding that this part of you developed for good reasons. It was trying to keep you safe. Think about it this way. Imagine you're trying to control the weather. You might check the forecast obsessively, carry 3 different types of jackets, and feel frustrated when it rains on your picnic. But what if, instead of fighting the weather, you learned to dance with it? What if you brought both sunscreen and an umbrella, then stayed present to whatever the sky offered? Take a breath with me again. Feel your shoulders. Are they carrying the weight of trying to control outcomes that aren't yours to manage? Gently let them drop. This shift from controlling to collaborating with life isn't just philosophical, it's practical. When we release our grip on having to manage every detail, several things happen. First, our nervous system begins to relax. The constant state of "what if" starts to dissolve. We begin to respond to what's actually happening rather than reacting to our fears about what might happen. Second, our relationships improve. When we stop trying to control how others feel, what they say, or how they respond to us, we create space for authentic connection. People sense when they're being managed versus when they're being loved. Third, our creativity returns. Control and creativity cannot coexist. One requires rigid adherence to a plan. The other requires flexibility and openness to the unexpected. But perhaps most importantly, we begin to trust life itself. Not in a naive way that ignores real challenges, but in a mature way that recognizes our part in the dance, while accepting that we're not the choreographer. The person in our story eventually realized that their phone wasn't the problem, their relationship with certainty was. They discovered that checking the weather forecast 15 times didn't actually influence whether it would rain. But it did influence whether they could enjoy the present moment. Notice what you're feeling right now as you listen to this. Are you relating to this story? Is there a part of you that recognizes the exhaustion of trying to control what cannot be controlled. We're about 1/5 of the way through our journey together, and already you might be sensing that there's another way to live. A way that doesn't require constant vigilance or perfect predictions. In Buddhist teaching, this recognition is the beginning of wisdom. When we see clearly how our attempts to control create suffering, we naturally begin to soften our grip. Not through force, but through understanding. The invisible prison has a door, and that door is always unlocked. We just need to remember that we hold the key. That key is this moment, this breath, this willingness to love what we cannot change. But here's what the ancient masters knew that changes everything, and that's what we're exploring next. Harvard researchers spent 20 years studying what they called the control paradox, and their findings would have made the Buddha smile. They discovered that people who try hardest to control outcomes are actually the least effective at influencing them. But those who learn what I'm about to share with you, they don't just become happier, they become more powerful in ways that matter. Real power, it turns out, isn't what most of us think it is. Let me tell you about a teaching that has been passed down for over 500 years. A student once approached a Buddhist master carrying an enormous stone. "Teacher," the student said, "I've been carrying this burden for so long. How do I become strong enough to carry it forever?" The master looked at the stone, then at the student's exhausted face. "I have a different question," he replied gently. "Why are you still carrying it?" This story isn't really about stones. It's about the emotional weight we carry when we believe we're responsible for outcomes that were never ours to control. The student in this story represents something universal, the part of us that believes our worth comes from our ability to manage life's difficulties. We carry relationship anxiety like a stone, believing that if we worry enough about someone's feelings, we can control them. We carry work stress like a stone, believing that if we plan for every contingency, we can guarantee success. But what the master understood, and what modern psychology now confirms, is that most of our suffering comes not from life's challenges, but from our resistance to them. Pause with me here. Take a moment to notice, what invisible stones are you carrying right now? What worries are you holding on to, believing that letting them go would be irresponsible? The Buddha called this teaching anicca, the truth of impermanence. Everything changes. Everything passes. Fighting this truth is like trying to stop a river with your bare hands. You'll exhaust yourself while the water flows around you anyway. But here's where most people misunderstand Buddhist teaching. Non-attachment doesn't mean not caring. The master wasn't telling the student to become cold or indifferent. He was pointing toward a deeper way of caring, one that doesn't exhaust us. Think of it this way. Imagine you're a gardener. Attachment says, I must force these flowers to bloom exactly when and how I want them to. Non-attachment says, I will provide water, sunlight, and nutrients, then trust the wisdom that knows how to create beauty. The gardener who practices non-attachment isn't passive. They're actively participating in growth without trying to control the process. This is what Buddhist psychology calls metta, loving kindness. It begins with developing compassion for ourselves, especially for the parts of us that want to control outcomes. When we can hold our anxious, controlling self with the same tenderness we'd offer a scared child, something shifts. Let's practice this together for just a moment. Place both hands on your heart. Feel the warmth there. Now silently say to yourself, may I be kind to the part of me that wants to control. May I be gentle with my fears. May I trust that I am learning to love wisely. This isn't just spiritual sentiment, it's neuroscience. When we practice self-compassion, we activate the parasympathetic nervous system. Our bodies literally relax. The stress hormones that flood our system when we're in control mode begin to decrease. But the ancient secret goes deeper than individual healing. When we practice loving what we cannot control, we discover what the Buddha called the middle way, a path between forcing and giving up, between attachment and indifference. The middle way in relationships means caring deeply while accepting that you cannot control another person's choices. The middle way at work means doing your best while releasing attachment to specific outcomes. The middle way in daily life means planning wisely while remaining open to life's surprises. A student once asked a Zen master, "How do I practice non-attachment with someone I love deeply?" The master replied, "Love them so completely that you want their highest good, even if it doesn't match your preferences." This is the secret that transforms everything. True love doesn't seek to control, it seeks to free. When we love our partners this way, they feel safe to be authentic. When we love our children this way, they develop genuine confidence. When we love ourselves this way, we stop exhausting our energy trying to be someone other than who we are. The student with the stone eventually understood. The master wasn't teaching about strength, he was teaching about wisdom. Some burdens are meant to be carried, others are meant to be released. The art is knowing the difference. Notice what's happening in your body right now. As you consider the possibility of loving without controlling, can you feel any softening? Any sense of relief? Modern research on what psychologists call psychological flexibility shows that people who can hold their goals lightly, caring about outcomes while not being attached to them, report higher life satisfaction, achieve their objectives more often than those who grip tightly to specific results. This makes perfect sense when we understand energy. When we're constantly worried about controlling outcomes, we're using our life force to resist what is rather than respond to what's possible. But when we practice the middle way, that same energy becomes available for creativity, connection, and positive action. The ancient masters knew something we're just rediscovering. Surrender isn't the opposite of power, it's the source of it. When we stop fighting life's current, we discover we can navigate it with grace. And this brings us to the most beautiful part of our journey together. 3 stories that show exactly how this transformation happens in real life. Scientists who study human behavior talk about breakthrough moments, those instances when someone's entire worldview shifts in a single realization. What I'm about to share with you are 3 such moments, 3 different ways that people discovered the art of loving what they cannot control. These aren't stories about perfect people. They're stories about ordinary humans who found extraordinary freedom. There was someone who believed that love meant making everything grow perfectly. Their relationships, their career, their personal growth, everything had to bloom according to their timeline. They would water opportunities obsessively, prune away any difficulty, and feel like a failure when things didn't flourish on schedule. One day, exhausted from forcing growth everywhere in their life, they sat in an actual garden. They noticed something that stopped them completely. The gardener wasn't rushing around frantically. She wasn't forcing flowers to bloom faster or leaves to change color on command. She was simply tending. "How do you make everything so beautiful?" they asked her. The gardener smiled and pointed to a section of apparently empty soil. "See that bare patch? Last year, it was the most magnificent rose bush. This year, it's resting. Next year, something new will grow there. I don't control what grows or when. I just provide love and trust the process." In that moment, something profound shifted. This person realized they had been trying to force-feed their life instead of nourishing it. They had confused effort with force, care with control. Take a breath with me here. Place your palm open on your lap. Can you feel the difference between a clenched fist and an open hand? Both can hold things, but only one allows for receiving. The Buddhist principle here is what's called right effort, the understanding that genuine progress comes from consistent, loving attention rather than forceful pushing. Like the gardener, we learn to provide the conditions for growth while trusting life's inherent wisdom about timing. This person began practicing what I call garden love, nurturing their relationships without demanding specific outcomes, working toward goals without attachment to exactly how they manifested, treating their own healing journey with the patience they would show a tender plant. The results were remarkable. Their relationships deepened because people felt loved rather than managed. Their work became more creative because they stopped forcing solutions and started allowing innovation to emerge. Their personal growth accelerated because they stopped fighting their own natural rhythm. Another person lived their life like they were swimming upstream, constantly struggling against the current of what was happening. Traffic jams were personal insults. Other people's moods were problems to solve. Unexpected changes were emergencies to control. One morning, stressed about a delayed flight, they found themselves sitting by a river near the airport. They watched the water flowing around rocks, not fighting them, not trying to move them, just flowing. A child nearby was playing with a toy boat, getting frustrated because it kept getting caught in eddies instead of going where she wanted. An elderly man sitting on the bench gently suggested, "What if you let the river take it where it wants to go, and then see what adventure it has?" The child released her grip on the boat's direction, and something magical happened. It found a current that carried it further and more gracefully than her forcing ever had. Watching this, the traveler suddenly understood something that would change everything. There's a difference between swimming with purpose and swimming against the flow. Pause for a moment and imagine this with me. Picture yourself in a river. Feel the difference between fighting the current and moving with it while still choosing your direction. One exhausts you, the other carries you. This is what Taoist philosophy calls Wu Wei, effortless action. It's not about being passive, but about finding the path of least resistance that still leads toward your values. Like water, we can be both powerful and fluid. This person began practicing river living. When stuck in traffic, instead of fighting the delay, they used the time for mindfulness practice. When family members were in difficult moods, instead of trying to fix them, they offered presence without taking responsibility for others' emotions. When plans changed unexpectedly, instead of clinging to the original agenda, they looked for the opportunities that the new direction might offer. Their stress levels dropped dramatically. Their effectiveness increased because they were working with life's energy rather than against it. Most surprisingly, they discovered that when you stop fighting the current, you often arrive at better destinations than you originally planned. The third person lived as if the whole world was a mirror that needed constant adjustment. If someone seemed unhappy, they twisted themselves into knots trying to reflect back joy. If a situation felt uncomfortable, they exhausted themselves trying to change everyone else's perspective. One day, looking at their actual reflection in a bathroom mirror, they had a moment of complete exhaustion. They realized they had been trying to control their reflection by changing the mirror instead of changing themselves. "I can't make the mirror show something different," they whispered to themselves. "But I can change what I bring to it." This simple realization unlocked something profound. You cannot control how others reflect back to you, but you can transform what you're emanating. Feel your heart right now as you hear this. Notice that it beats the same rhythm regardless of whether others approve or disapprove. Your inherent worth doesn't actually change based on external validation. This person began practicing what Buddhist psychology calls inner refuge, finding their sense of safety and worth within themselves rather than in others' responses. Instead of trying to manage everyone's opinions of them, they focused on being authentic. Instead of attempting to control family dynamics, they concentrated on showing up with love regardless of how it was received. The transformation was profound. Relationships improved because people felt genuine connection rather than manipulation. Work became more fulfilling because they were expressing their true talents rather than performing for approval. Most importantly, they found a peace that didn't depend on everything going right. Notice what you're feeling as you hear these three stories. Do any of them remind you of patterns in your own life? That recognition isn't judgment, it's wisdom beginning to dawn. All three of these people discovered the same truth through different doorways. Love doesn't seek to control, it seeks to nourish. Whether we're tending a garden, flowing with a river, or accepting what we see in the mirror, the practice is the same. We learn to love what is while still caring deeply about what could be. We're at the turning point in our journey together now. You've understood why control creates suffering, learned what ancient wisdom teaches about true power, and seen how three people found freedom. Now comes the most practical question. How do we live this wisdom day by day? That's exactly what we're exploring next. The daily practice of loving what you cannot control. Here's what will change everything starting tomorrow morning. There are 3 moments each day when the universe offers you a choice between control and love. Most people miss these moments completely. But once you learn to recognize them, your entire life begins to transform. These aren't grand, dramatic moments. They're quiet opportunities hidden in the ordinary rhythm of daily life. And the beautiful thing is, you don't need to be perfect at this. You just need to begin. The first moment happens before you're even fully awake. It's the difference between a reactive morning and a responsive one. Most people wake up and immediately check their phones, scanning for problems to solve, messages to answer, weather to worry about. They start the day by handing their peace over to external circumstances. But there's another way. Imagine waking up and, before reaching for your phone, taking 3 conscious breaths. Imagine starting your day not by asking, "What do I need to control today?" but by asking, "How can I love what this day brings?" Let's practice this together right now. Place one hand on your heart, one on your belly. Take a breath that's deep enough to feel in both places. As you breathe in, silently say, "I am here." As you breathe out, say, "I am open to what comes." This isn't just a nice idea. This is practical neuroscience. When we start our day with presence instead of reactivity, we activate the prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain responsible for wisdom and perspective. We literally wire ourselves for peace instead of panic. The morning practice isn't about forcing positivity or pretending challenges don't exist. It's about establishing a foundation of loving awareness that can hold whatever arises. It's like tuning an instrument before playing music. You're preparing your heart to respond beautifully to whatever song the day brings. One person I know practices what they call morning loving, kindness for the uncontrollable. Before getting out of bed, they send love to traffic they might encounter, to people whose moods they cannot manage, to weather they cannot change. May this day unfold with grace. May I meet whatever comes with an open heart. This practice takes less than 5 minutes, but it changes everything. Instead of bracing for problems, they're opening to possibilities. Instead of armoring against difficulty, they're softening into resilience. The second crucial moment happens when everything falls apart in the middle of your day. You know this moment, when plans change, when someone doesn't respond as expected, when technology fails, when the carefully constructed schedule dissolves into chaos. This is where ancient wisdom meets modern life. The Buddhist masters had a phrase for this: the unexpected teacher. They understood that these disruptions aren't obstacles to peace, they're invitations to practice it. Pause with me here. Think of the last time your plans were completely derailed. Can you remember the feeling in your body? The tightness, the resistance, the urgent need to fix everything immediately. Here's what changes everything. In that moment of disruption, you have about 90 seconds to choose your response. Neuroscientists call this the emotional hijack window, the time between when something happens and when your nervous system locks into a reaction pattern. Within those 90 seconds, you can practice what I call the midday reset. It's a simple but profound practice. First, notice the urge to control. Don't judge it. Don't fight it. Just notice. Here's my mind trying to fix and force and arrange. Second, place your hand on your heart and take one conscious breath. This isn't to calm yourself down, it's to remember who you are beneath the reaction. Third, ask the question that changes everything. How can I love what's happening right now, even if I don't like it? This question isn't about passive acceptance. It's about finding the response that comes from love rather than fear. Sometimes loving what's happening means setting a boundary. Sometimes it means asking for help. Sometimes it means simply breathing and waiting for clarity. One person discovered this practice when their biggest client unexpectedly cancelled a project. Instead of panicking, they took the midday reset. They noticed their urge to immediately start calling other clients, to frantically try to control the financial outcome. Instead, they breathed, asked how they could love this moment, and realized this might be the universe creating space for something better. 6 months later, that cancellation led to the most fulfilling project of their career. But even if it hadn't, they discovered something more valuable. They could trust themselves to respond wisely to whatever life brought. The third transformative moment happens at the end of your day. Most people review their day with either harsh self-criticism or anxious planning for tomorrow. But there's a practice that ancient masters use that can turn every evening into a doorway to deeper peace. Instead of asking, "What did I do wrong?" or "What do I need to control tomorrow?" we can ask, "What am I grateful for that I couldn't control today?" Take a moment right now to think about today. What happened that you didn't plan? What beauty appeared that you didn't arrange? What support showed up that you didn't orchestrate? This practice of gratitude for the uncontrollable isn't just feel-good spirituality. It's rewiring your brain to notice life's inherent generosity. When we regularly acknowledge the gifts that come without our management, we begin to trust that we're being cared for in ways beyond our understanding. The evening practice also includes what Buddhist psychology calls loving review, looking at your day with the same compassion you'd offer a dear friend. When you notice moments where you try to control what couldn't be controlled, instead of self-judgment, you offer self-kindness. Of course, I wanted to manage that outcome. Of course, I felt scared when things changed. That's so human and understandable. Let's practice this together. Think of one moment today where you felt the urge to control something beyond your influence. Now place your hand on your heart and say silently, "I understand why I wanted to control that. May I be gentle with my very human desire for safety." This loving review doesn't make us passive or excuse harmful behavior. Instead, it creates the emotional safety we need to learn and grow. When we're not fighting ourselves, we have more energy available for wisdom and positive change. One person practices what they call evening release. Before sleep, they imagine their hands opening and releasing all the outcomes they've been trying to manage. I did my part today with love. Now I release the results and trust that life knows what it's doing. Notice what's happening in your body right now as you consider these three practices. Does something feel lighter? More possible? That lightness is your nervous system recognizing a path toward peace. These aren't advanced spiritual practices requiring years of meditation experience. They're simple, practical ways to love what you cannot control throughout your ordinary day. The morning foundation, the midday reset, the evening integration, together, they create a framework for living with an open heart in a world you cannot control. You don't have to be perfect at these practices. You don't have to remember them every day. The goal isn't perfection, it's direction. Each time you choose love over control, even for just one breath, you're strengthening what I call your loving awareness muscle. And here's what starts to happen when you practice this way of living, a transformation so beautiful it might surprise you. Six months after learning to love what she couldn't control, someone wrote to me, "I don't know how to explain it, but my life feels completely different, even though most of the external circumstances are the same. It's like I've been living in a house with all the curtains drawn, and suddenly someone opened them to let in the light." This is what transformation actually looks like. Not a dramatic overhaul of your entire existence, but a fundamental shift in how you relate to the life you already have. We're in the final part of our journey together now, and I want you to know something. The fact that you've stayed with me this far means you're already changing. The brain patterns that brought you to this moment of listening are different from the ones you started with an hour ago. You've been practicing presence, and presence is always transformative. But let me tell you about what this transformation looks like when it becomes a way of life. The first thing people notice is how their relationships change. When you stop trying to control how others feel, think, or respond, something magical happens. They start feeling safe around you. Think about it. How do you feel when you're with someone who's constantly trying to manage your mood, fix your problems, or change your perspective? There's an underlying tension, isn't there? A sense that you can't fully relax because you're being evaluated and adjusted. But when you're with someone who loves you, without trying to change you, you exhale. You feel permission to be authentic. You feel seen rather than managed. This is what happens when we practice loving what we cannot control in our relationships. Our partners stop feeling like projects and start feeling like people. Our children develop genuine confidence instead of people-pleasing patterns. Our friendships deepen because we're offering presence instead of advice, understanding instead of solutions. One person told me, "I used to think loving my family meant fixing their problems. Now I realize loving them means trusting their ability to navigate their own lives while I show up with support when they ask for it." The difference in our family dynamic has been extraordinary. Take a moment to imagine this in your own life. What would your most important relationships feel like if you offered love without conditions, support without control? This doesn't mean becoming passive or never offering help. It means offering from a place of love rather than anxiety, support rather than management. It means trusting that the people you care about have their own inner wisdom, even when they're struggling to access it. The second area of transformation is how we approach our work and creative projects. When we release attachment to specific outcomes, we paradoxically become more effective. Here's why. Creativity and control are incompatible states. Control requires you to know exactly what you're trying to produce. Creativity requires you to remain open to what wants to emerge. When we practice loving what we cannot control, we create space for innovation, collaboration, and solutions we never could have planned. One person discovered this when they stopped trying to control every aspect of a team project. Instead of micromanaging every detail, they focused on creating conditions where everyone's best ideas could emerge. The project exceeded all expectations, not because of more control, but because of less. Another person realized they had been strangling their creative work with perfectionism. When they learned to love the process without attachment to specific outcomes, their art flourished in ways they never imagined. They stopped creating to prove their worth and started creating to express their truth. Notice what you're feeling as you consider your own work or creative life. Where might you be constraining possibility by trying to control outcomes? This shift doesn't make us less ambitious or committed. If anything, it makes us more powerful because our energy isn't being wasted on resistance. When we work with life's flow rather than against it, we often discover opportunities that our controlling mind never would have seen. Perhaps the most profound transformation is how we relate to difficulty itself. Instead of seeing problems as evidence that we've failed to control life properly, we begin to see them as invitations to grow. This doesn't mean becoming passive about injustice or accepting harmful situations. It means approaching challenges from a place of wisdom rather than reactivity, love rather than fear. When someone you care about is struggling, instead of exhausting yourself trying to fix them, you offer steady presence. When unexpected changes disrupt your plans, instead of fighting the new reality, you look for the opportunities it might contain. When your own healing journey feels slow or unclear, instead of forcing progress, you trust the timing of your becoming. Place your hand on your heart again. Can you feel how different this approach feels from constantly bracing against difficulty? This is your nervous system recognizing the path toward peace. One person shared, "I used to see every challenge as evidence that I wasn't controlling my life well enough. Now I see challenges as life offering me chances to practice love in new ways. It's completely changed how I move through difficulty." Here's something important I need to tell you. You will forget all of this. You'll get caught up in trying to control outcomes again. You'll grip tightly to plans that don't work out. You'll exhaust yourself managing other people's feelings. And that's not a failure. It's part of the practice. The goal isn't to become someone who never falls back into control patterns. The goal is to become someone who notices when they're gripping and knows how to gently open their hands again. Think of this like learning to ride a bicycle. At first, you fall frequently. But each time you get back on, you remember more quickly how to find your balance. Eventually, balance becomes natural, though you still occasionally wobble. This is how the practice of loving what you cannot control works. You'll still feel the urge to manage outcomes, but you'll catch yourself faster. You'll still want to control how others respond to you, but you'll remember more quickly to release that burden. The practice becomes notice, breathe, release, love. Notice the gripping. Breathe into the space between stimulus and response. Release what isn't yours to control, and choose love as your response. What's most beautiful about this transformation is how it ripples outward. When you practice loving what you cannot control, you give others permission to do the same. Your peace becomes contagious. Your authenticity invites others to be real. Your trust in life's wisdom helps others remember their own inherent wholeness. Children who grow up around adults who practice this way develop emotional resilience. Partners feel safe to be vulnerable. Communities become more supportive because people aren't so busy managing each other. We're almost at the end of our journey together, and I want to acknowledge something. The person listening to these words right now is not the same person who started this journey an hour ago. You've been practicing presence, considering new possibilities, feeling into a different way of being. That's not small, that's transformation beginning. You don't need to implement everything perfectly. You don't need to become a different person overnight. You just need to remember that love is always available as a response, even when, especially when, you cannot control what's happening. The art of loving what you cannot control isn't a destination you arrive at. It's a path you walk, one breath at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of opening your hands when you notice them clenched. And this brings us to the most important part, taking this wisdom with you as you return to your beautiful, uncontrollable life. We've traveled a long journey together. An hour ago, you came here perhaps with a heart carrying burdens, with a mind trying to control what cannot be controlled. And now, pause for a moment to feel what has shifted. Place your hand on your heart one last time in this journey. Can you sense the difference? Maybe it's a slightly deeper breath, shoulders more relaxed, or simply a feeling that you don't have to carry everything alone. That is love, beginning to replace the need for control. That is your heart remembering how to rest. The stories we've shared about the person in the invisible prison, about the ancient secret of true power, about 3 paths to freedom, about daily practice and the transformation that unfolds, they all lead to one simple truth: you don't need to be the manager of the universe. You just need to be yourself, with an open heart. The art of loving what you cannot control isn't something you learn once and forget. It's a path you'll walk every day, sometimes remembering, sometimes forgetting, but always able to return. Each time you notice yourself gripping something and slowly open your hands, you're practicing love. Each time you choose to breathe deeply, instead of reacting immediately, you're creating space for wisdom. I want to invite you to do something. In the coming days, pay attention to those small moments when you remember what we've shared. Maybe it's when you're stuck in traffic and choose to breathe instead of frustrate. Maybe it's when someone responds differently than you expected and you choose understanding instead of trying to change them. Those moments are miracles unfolding. And if you feel these words have touched something within you, I invite you to share your experience in the comments below. What has shifted in you during this journey? Which story awakens something in your soul? The Where Hearts Rest community is built from brave hearts like yours, people willing to choose love over fear. If you know someone else carrying the burden of trying to control everything, please share this journey with them. Sometimes what someone needs is simply the reminder that they don't have to do it all alone. And if these words have found their way to your heart, I invite you to stay with us by subscribing to the channel. This isn't just a YouTube channel. It's a sacred space where hearts seeking rest can gather and support each other on the path of love. Take one final deep breath with me. Thank you for trusting to share this precious time. Thank you for opening your heart to new possibilities. Thank you for remembering that love is always a choice. May you be at peace. May you be free from the suffering of control. May you remember the way home to your heart. Until we rest together again, carry this love with you and let it ripple out everywhere you go. Where hearts rest, where love needs no conditions,